Hello and welcome to episode number 24 of this lecture series. Now, I suspect the more observant among you will notice that there's something slightly different today, which is that I'm not recording this indoors. And the reason is that some of the materials, two of the materials that I'm going to be talking about today have such extraordinarily powerful and arguably unpleasant smells that my wife, Tanya Sanchez, requested that I do this entire thing outdoors. Otherwise, the house would be just pestilential for the next day or so. So I'm doing this in the garden. So this is the second lecture on the fruities. The reason I'm doing a second one is really twofold. First of all, I had forgotten a couple of materials in the original perfumery kit from Perfumer's Apprentice. And secondly, Spiros Drosopoulos sent me some new materials which he's included now in the kit. And they happen to be, several of them happen to be very interesting fruity notes, including one particularly interesting one, which we'll come to last, because that is the one that has caused me to retreat to the garden. So, as an example fragrance of, I suppose one would describe them as colossally fruity notes, I chose a fragrance that both Tanya Sanchez and I are extremely fond of, which is Badgley Mishka. I believe it's discontinued, and it's a monster fruity oriental aldehydic floral thing, and it's tremendously trashy and absolutely wonderful. Sadly, I really don't think it's all that easy to find anymore. Anyway, it's one of my favorites in this particular style. Let's see if this table works as a smelling strip holder. Perfect. Now, you remember I mentioned that esters were a little bit of a minority among perfumery materials in the fruity direction. There's one major exception, which is Linalyl acetate, which is the ester of linalool, which is itself pretty much a lavender smell, and acetic acid. Linalyl acetate is a wonderfully ambiguous note because it's really half lavender, half fruit. It sort of sits in very much in between the fresh herbaceous aspect of lavender and a definite citrus aspect. And it's really remarkable how a material can sort of straddle a border between two territories, 1 foot in one foot in the other. And again, this makes it particularly interesting. Now, linalyl acetate is the majority component of a natural material, which is the oil of bergamot. Bergamot is a member of the citrus family, and it seems to come in different varietals. I'm not very familiar with the botany of bergamot, or indeed any botany. I'm terrible at botany. I wish we had studied it at school. I'm kind of surprised that most of us, I speak for myself, go through life without any idea of what we're actually looking at when we're looking at plants. Like, I know this is a plum tree because the place is covered in plums, but that's about it. Anyway, bergamot is a citrus which is not edible just by itself. Mostly what people use here in Greece, it takes the form of a rather strangely colored orange, and people take the peel and candy it in sugar syrup, and it makes a sort of a jam, or as they call them in Greece, a spoon sweet. And I don't find it particularly interesting, but it does have a Linalyl acetate angle. Now, in perfumery, it's absolutely fundamental to all citrus fragrances. That's bergamot oil, and this is what I'm looking at right now. It's bergamot essential oil from Calabria. Calabria is the tip of Italy, and if I compare that to the Linalyl acetate, we're talking a completely different ballgame. I mean, Linalyl acetate pure is not bad, but this stuff is in a different league altogether. First of all, it's much more citrus. It has much more orange. It still has the Linalyl acetate angle, but it's richer, vastly more complicated, and has a caramelic, almost sugary candy floss angle to it, which is wonderful. And this illustrates perfectly well what happens when you replace, some accountant looks at a formula and says, what's that line item? It looks a bit expensive. And you say, well, that's bergamot oil from Calabria. And they say, isn't that Linalyl acetate? Can't we replace it? Oh, okay. And you replace one with the other, and the fragrance comes out completely different and rather poverty-stricken. This has happened time and time again in perfumery, because saving money on the composition is a driving force in all of mass market perfumery. I have to remove this smelling strip of Bajli Mishka because I'm downwind of it and I can't smell anything else with that around. So, these two are respectively the synthetic and the natural, corresponding to bergamot smell. And now I'm going to move on to a complete synthetic ester called Manzanate, and I just have to look at, it's actually ethyl 2-methylpentanoate. And I remember being asked to smell this many years ago when it was a Quest or even a Narden material before the different mergers that eventually give rise to modern day Givaudan. And I remember finding it somewhat unpleasant, to be honest. And now on re-smelling it, I still feel that way. It has a very sharp and very chemical note, but I can see how this would be great in an apple composition. It has the apple note of, I don't even know what the varietal is called, the sort of the thick-skinned, rather mealy red apples, which I don't like, incidentally, and a very boozy, a very sort of cognac-like background. And you can smell the ketone, you can smell the sort of nail varnish aspect of apple very intensely here. It's an interesting instance. This is a 10% in solvent, and it contradicts this general rule that I gave, that esters are not very powerful. This is actually a pretty powerful material, and perfumers actually quite like this guy because in small doses it gives a pretty convincing realistic apple skin smell. Exchange those two because we're going, hang on, I'm trying to go up in intensity, otherwise my nose will be shot. So the next material is called Petitgrain. Strange name, frankly. It's in French it literally means small seed. I'm not sure what this has to do with small seed. It's an essential oil which is extracted from the leaves and the stems of the bitter orange tree. And I'm fortunate to live in Athens, in a neighborhood where bitter orange trees are everywhere. And it's amazing because you walk around in winter and you see these beautiful trees with beautiful oranges, and the oranges are inedible. If you pick one and cut it and try and eat it, it's, first of all, definitely bitter. It has no particular interesting orange taste. But the flowers are phenomenal. The orange flower is absolutely beautiful smell. And this extract of the leaves, Petitgrain, smells really remarkable. It doesn't, I don't think you would, if you first smelled somebody put this under your nose without telling you what it was, you wouldn't say, oh, orange. You would say, oh, what a strange smell. It's sort of, it's definitely got some of the Linalyl acetate, but it's also got a dirty, sort of almost meaty note to it, and a peppery angle. And you can tell when smelling this material that it's been used in perfumes that you're familiar with. You can recognize it as a part. Now with time, as it evaporates, you can smell more of the citrus coming out. It's very interesting. The top note was more medicinal and weirdly meaty, as I said. Very, very surprising. Very, very interesting material, this one. So now in this series we're going gradually up in intensity, and the next step up in intensity, I'm doing that so I don't get, my nose doesn't get too tired from all this. So the next step in intensity is Davana oil, and Davana is a member of the Artemisia family. The Sanskrit name for it apparently is Davanam. And it's become quite popular in the last 20 years or so as a material in perfumery. I'm not sure what caused it to. And small wonder, because it's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful smell. It's a weird combination of very sweet. It's got a sweet apricot peach-like, but more like jam aspect, and it's got a fresh camphoraceous thing in it as well. A sort of a leather aspect, strangely enough. And a definite sort of cat piss, not quite sulfuraceous, but at any rate urinous thing. It's really very, very complex. It in that respect, it reminds me of osmanthus, which has also this big spectrum of odor. There's also a strong tobacco angle to Davana. It's a very complex, overall, unquestionably fruity material, but pretty huge. It's funny, as time goes on, it becomes more tobacco-y and more sort of cognac, liqueur, sort of the fruity aspects of liqueur, like Armagnac more than cognac. Very nice. Now, the next one belongs into a completely different category. So far, we've been talking about fairly discrete materials that when you put them under your nose, I suppose the Davana might be at the higher end of the normal, but now we're entering a completely different world. The next one is called bianoxime, depending on how you pronounce the name of the functional group NOH, oxime. And this guy is at 10%, and I can understand why you'd use 10%, but you'd have to be pretty careful with it. This is incredibly intense black currant, but it's the cat piss aspect of blackcurrant in its pure form, essentially. This is one of those compounds, it's not a sulfur compound, it's an oxime, but it plays the same sort of role as the sulfur compounds do. It adds that last degree, the last touch of realism to a red fruit note to give you the blackcurrant. And so now the material I've kept for last is in here. And I'll show you. It's inside a sealed box. And inside the sealed box is another sealed box. And inside that sealed box is a little bottle, nicely screwed tight. Now, if you ever visit a fragrance company and you find that there's any material on the shelf which is in double sealing, double packaging like this, one jar inside another or one box inside another, be careful, because that means that whatever's inside this Russian doll collection of boxes is going to be an absolute monster. And this one is absolutely true to form. It is a very powerful material. I think this is a 1% solution. It's sold as 1%. That already tells you the stuff is pretty serious. And it's called Thiomenthone. And is described, let me try and find the original email. Stinky, almost like sewage smelling material, but essential for the sultry note in certain fruits. So, now, here's what's really strange. I practically don't smell the sulfur in this. When I dipped a strip in the 1%, my wife, Tanya Sanchez, just basically ran down the stairs and said, "What is going on with the drains? Is the sewer blocked? What is this horrible smell that's everywhere?" And to me it was like, that's a nice fruity smell. And she just said, please don't ever open that thing again within the house. So that's why I'm out here today. But this is a sulfur compound. And it's basically the smell of mint, the molecule of mint, Thiomenthone, but with a sulfur, with an SH added to it. And it illustrates various interesting aspects. The first one is that you need one of these bad smells, be it kalanamak or the bianoxime or this dude, to finish off a nice tropical, or indeed not necessarily tropical, even just blackcurrant fruit note. This requirement for a foul-smelling material in fruity notes is very interesting to me. The second thing is that this is a perfect illustration of the smell of a molecule being the smell of its parts, because it is mint plus sulfur, thiomenthone. It's almost like you're reading the structural formula with your nose. And again, it's going back to my early lectures, this is a perfect separation between, if you want the functional group smell, SH, and the carbon skeleton smell and vibrations in the fingerprint region. If you, for example, smelt another sulfur molecule, really high intensity sulfur molecule, this would come back smelling of mint, which is really kind of what it smells like to me, actually. It's pretty minty. When I said that to Tanya, she said, "Are you out of your mind? Why are you even doing lectures on aroma chemicals when your nose or brain is deranged?" And I apologize for this, but to me it doesn't have any of this sewer-like thing, but in small concentrations. To me it just smells great. So there you have it. This is the end of the fruity series. We've gone from pleasant fruit to very strong fruit to nuclear-powered fruit.